Hey, Black Like Me listeners, this is Alex G. You know, in the midst of all of the turmoil that we're experiencing, I keep having these glimpses of hope. One is the premiere of the documentary in which I was featured. It's called Justified Journey. It had 1,800 people registered to view it online. I think we had about 1,100 who showed up. Totally blew my mind. It's a story explaining how I met my white relatives who are descendants of Reuben G., the gentleman who owned and raped my great-great-great-grandmother, Venus. You can go to my website, alexg.com, to get the link to see it. But just a powerful experience, and people wanting to understand the history of slavery and systemic racism. It's just very powerful to have that eye-opening experience. Thank you to all of those who participated. The other thing is, my team has informed me that we have beat our standing best download record almost 6 times in probably the last 2.5 weeks. Almost 6 times, like 5.87, almost 6 times. People are downloading it because they're wanting to learn. They're wanting to ask questions. They're becoming patrons. They're supporting the work. And I really, really, really love that. The new people are coming on strong. Hey, my old listeners, you might want to catch up. Another thing that we're doing is we don't need to, but we're dropping old content. And listen, we've got new stuff. We're going to be dropping new stuff that we've recorded, that we're getting to, that's ready to go. But we're dropping old things so that our new listeners have a sense of how we have spoken into these issues before we knew they were issues. So we're dropping 2 today. One is a conversation with Tony Chambers, who is a Black professional, educational professional here in Madison, Wisconsin. And he lays out the progressive lie that for many of us as African Americans, the greatest wounds that we have received in this racial battle, they've come from those who have considered themselves progressive and liberal. You're going to want to listen to this and share with all of your white liberal friends. That's what I need you to do. The second one is an episode that's called When People Think My White Assistant is Dr. Alex G. Tyler Nylen, who is my podcast manager, often accompanies me to meetings. We walked into one setting, and he's young enough to be my son. Someone extended their hand to him and said, "You must be Dr. Alex G." And at this time, he was 25. Now, you can have a doctorate at 25, but he looks 15. Because there's no way in hell did they think I could be Dr. Alex G. And he said, "No, actually, my boss right here is Dr. Alex G." And if you think that that's the first time someone has done that to me with a white assistant, one I had before Tyler, then you're very mistaken. So you're going to want to listen to these episodes. You're going to want to share them because we want to intrigue you to consider listening to past episodes because they are fire. So, hey, listen, I don't want to delay you any longer. I want you to listen to these episodes. Thank you so much for listening. Please, here's what you can do. Listen. Write a review. That helps. You want to support Black podcasters? Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting, but write a review. Second, subscribe because you get content when we drop it. And if you subscribe also to my website, alexg.com, when I post videos and blogs and other things that aren't necessarily podcast information, you are part of the weekly email thread that lets you know he just dropped some new content. And as always, share. If you read something you like, quote it, post it, repost it, tweet it out. But let people know that you're listening and that you're learning. So lean in, friends. Be transformed by this information and help us all make this world a better place. Because goodness knows we need all the help we can get. Enjoy. Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one Black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, everybody. This is another episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. I'm your podcast host, and I'm glad that you're here with us again. As always, I attempt to bring episodes that are exciting, thought-provoking, things that give you a special insight into my world or my day-to-day activities, just to process how things may play out in another person's life, particularly with me, a Black person's life. So I have my white crew in the studio with me today. And so I'm going to begin talking with Tyler, but I'm going to be joined in just a bit by Jeremy and Eli, who's my producer, to have a discussion about something that I just experienced. So I want to start the show by talking about an experience that I had recently. So Tyler's my executive assistant, and he's in his mid-20s. I'm in my mid-30s. I'm old enough to be his dad. In fact, his dad and I are the same age. And so we walked into a place where they knew I was going to be having a meeting. They looked at Tyler and said, "Hello, are you Dr. G?" Now, we walked in together. Tyler's white. I'm Black. I'm 30 years older. And I was taken aback for a moment. Now, I knew Tyler felt awkward because I know Tyler. And because he jumped in and said, no, this actually my boss is Dr. G, because Tyler kind of goes into this real like ultra professional kind of I'm going to smooth it over kind of voice. It's that work that white voice.
It's that work that white voice.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'm finna diffuse
Hi, I'm actually
this.
Dr. G's assistant.
Right, that's exactly what he said. He said he went right into that voice. And,
Dr. G right
but
here.
what he really was saying was, oh no, you didn't. And so the situation didn't get ugly. We sort of laughed it off. But it's one of those things that when it happens, it begins to trigger something else. And so let me just pause for just a moment, bring Tyler to the mic. Am I remembering the event or this incident correctly? You and I both walked in together and someone assumed that you were Dr. Alex G.
Of course. I actually do think it's interesting that I don't know, even that you're asking, did you remember it right?
Right.
Because, yeah, of course you did. I mean, you were there.
Yes.
We were both there, and yeah, like that. Yeah, that's exactly how it happened.
So why did you jump into that hyper white voice?
Well,
We just do that again, like what you said.
Hi, my name's I'm actually Tyler. I'm Dr. G's assistant. Dr. G's right here.
Why did you go into that voice?
Well,
or that mode?
That
what
mode.
happened?
Well, in me,
because I wasn't really. It happened, but it sort of hit my subconscious because you got to do that when you're Black in America sometimes because so much of this stuff happened. But your response triggered in me, this did just happen. So it's kind of interesting that your response actually caused me to have a stronger reaction than what she said. So anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I mean, the thing for me is immediately, because I mean, I've been your assistant for about a year now, and I know.
And how long have you been white?
I've been white. I think 26 years.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
As far as I
know. I just like knowing my guess.
As far as I'm aware.
Okay.
But I know when that happened, I've heard you talk about this before, like about how this has happened before, where your assistant or someone has come in and they've assumed that they are, but it has never happened with me. And honestly, at first, like I didn't think it would happen with me.
That was going to be my next question.
I didn't think it would happen with me because I look like I'm 12. First off, so I don't necessarily look like I would be a doctor already. Most people ask me if I'm 18.
They really do. So what about you looked doctoral, professorial?
It's
accomplished, sage, wise. What? Because not only do you look 12, you dress 12. And that's no.
Whoa!
No. Boom, boom. No. What I mean is, you don't typically wear suits unless you're giving up, a public address. No, really, that was not meant to be. White people are so sensitive. Y'all always play.
That's how. No, you've said before. I need to take you shopping.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I mean, what I mean is, you dress very casually. Well, because you relate to young people, and you all are very casual. So what I mean is, you didn't walk in wearing an ascot. You didn't have a briefcase. So what about you looked professorial or doctoral that evening?
I don't think anything looked like that or should have necessitated that.
What do you think she saw?
Well, she saw a white person.
Yes.
I just remember, and going back to the voice thing, why I did that is
the voice thing.
The voice thing. Hi.
Actually, You do that when you're mad or when you're trying to really. Sometimes
I'm trying to smooth things.
You're trying to smooth things over, right?
Well, because I knew, like I said, I'd heard that happen to you before, and I know you've said that, and I know it was a place of pain.
But for you to be involved, you're right there. And it's happening.
I hadn't seen it yet, and so I instantly got really defensive. And I was just like, no,
this is not supposed to happen.
No, this isn't. Wait, can you translate it again? What is? Can you translate my white voice of like smoothing things over for me?
Well,
let's say okay. So I'm gonna say it again. Tell me what I really said again. Hi, I'm Dr. G's assistant, Tyler.
What you're really saying was, Heifer, what in the hell are you thinking? I'm looking 12. This black man standing over my shoulders, the most senior minister in this city, an author, international speaker, has run nonprofit organizations. How the hell do you think I'm Dr. Alex G? What are you smoking? That's what you were really saying.
That's a good translation.
And you were saying, no. This is actually Dr. G. But what you were really saying was, oh, no, you didn't. Because now I'm going to have to sit down and hear him process this. And now this is part of my experience. Yep. And I know that happened with him and other people, but they were probably close to his age. This is not happening with someone half his age. And now you think I'm the doctor?
I'm less than half your age.
That's what you were saying.
Yeah.
You were saying, oh, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You're thinking, white lady, please.
Yeah. So I was I just got, really defensive of there and jumped in. And then we just walk away and you're like, what the hell was that?
Like, Right. And here's what's really interesting about those kinds of scenarios. On one hand, you have to learn to let the stuff just roll off your back, because otherwise, if you just get snagged in everything, it gets stuck in your head and it throws you off. But if you sort of eat crow and forget about it, you get this sick feeling in the pit of your stomach. So either you're going to feel the heat in your mouth by what you say, or in your gut by what you don't say. But it's really a no-win scenario. And here's the thing that's so crazy. There's nothing that we can point to say she was racist and that was a racist act. So it's not like it was clear, cut and dry. So because there's no empirical data that states this is what it is, because she didn't call me a name or any of those kinds of things, it makes it so tentative, so nebulous that you can't really pinpoint it. So you don't know where to put it. But what it did is it awakened other experiences. About 20 years ago, I had a white assistant closer to my age, but he was dressed with just a collar shirt and slacks. But I had the suit and the tie. I think I was actually presenting somewhere that day, and he was with me. The host, whoever was welcoming us, extended their hand to him and said, "You must be Dr. Alex G." And just like you, except he didn't really go into, he was sort of oblivious to that reality. He just said, no. Actually, my boss right here is Dr. Alex G. I'm his assistant. So he almost verbatim, he said what you said, not as indignant, because again, this was 20 years ago and he wasn't really aware of those differences. I hadn't talked very broadly or very openly about those kinds of experiences. So I don't even think to this day probably wouldn't read it the way I did. But I clearly was dressed in a suit and he wasn't. So I thought, what made them think he was a CEO? What made them think that he was the doctor? The other thing that happened is I went to a function at an organization. I won't name the organization, but I'm on its board now, ironically, interestingly. I was coming to a meeting, running a few minutes late, so I was rushing in. Again, this is a place that requires shirt, jacket, tie. I'm walking out as a white woman. I'm walking in as she's walking out. She hands me her car keys and describes her car to me. You can't make this shit up. And so I got mad at myself for being late, because had I been early, I would have gone and found her car. And I wouldn't have stolen it, but I would have moved it. I would have parked it in an intersection. I would have driven it up the steps of the Capitol. I would have put it right in front of the fire station door. I would have parked it someplace. I would have been worth it to be 15 minutes late for that meeting. But it happened so quickly that I must have looked at her with this incredulous look in my eyes, or expression in my eyes. She kind of had this old crap look. But there is a valet booth 20 feet from both of us, where there's a guy with coveralls because it's cold, baseball cap. it's clear that he was working outside. It's clear that he was the guy parking the car. And it's also clear that no one looked like me who parked her car because the place didn't have any employees who looked like me. So she didn't give her keys to a black man when she parked her car. So why is she going to give them to a black man to get it? I remembered all of that the night this happened. Now the one I'm describing where the lady gave me the keys, that was 25 years ago. I was like new as Nehemiah's CEO. So I was just a couple years older than you. I was probably like in my late 20s. Sure. So I was trying, it took me a while to process it, but I remembered that incident from 20 years back when someone said that to you. So one of the things that I really want the Black Like Me, listening family, my crew, the people who are following what we're doing is to understand, I don't get up each morning thinking someone's going to think that my assistant's me. Because that would just that makes you get up off the wrong side of the bed. But what's interesting is within the span of 1 month, you're mistaken for me, and I'm the first African American. I'm the CEO of the first African American led organization to receive this $1 million grant that we got from the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Medicine and Public Health. So within like 4 weeks of time, I have mistaken identity where people think you're me, but I'm recognized as being a leader who happens to be black, whose black-led organization just beat out competition for a $1 million grant. And I hold those two realities in tension: that I'm a that my work is groundbreaking, that my team has helped to exude incredible leadership and effectiveness and work in the community, but I can still, in the midst of celebrating all of that, stand in a place where someone half my age is mistaken for me. And I just think holding those two things together has to make me angry. Otherwise, it would make me crazy.
Yeah. And it highlights why the grant is 1,000% necessary and all of that, because
ironically.
Because for anyone who doesn't know what the grant's about or anything like that, do you want to I don't know, I feel like
it's about reducing microaggressions that African American people are experiencing in places with very low African American population. So what we're understanding is that some of the social determinants of death or early death in blacks is the fact that stress due to isolation, microaggressions, subtle and not so subtle racism is making us die more quickly than our white counterparts of the same disease. And so the irony that I had that experience and it made me reflect back on 2 or 3 other experiences creates the microaggressions and some of the stress that our work is trying to reduce by educating people, telling stories like this, training white allies, building capacity in black emerging leaders and grassroots leaders so that we can eradicate unnecessary stress, because that has been directly linked to premature death in blacks. And so now it's not just about being pissed and angry, it's about premature mortality, which is scary and unnecessary.
Yeah. Because when you were saying there's no direct evidence that this was a racially charged incident, or there's no like empirical evidence, that's what makes places like Madison feel so much more deadly and feel so much more how you actually address it. Because, clearly, like, we both were contextually there. We knew what was happening, but to anyone else, it probably could be reasoned away for a lot of people, or would be reasoned away by a lot of people. But when we know what happened and we know what the actual effect, where even if it was an honest mistake,
sure,
I did that in quotes,
air quotes,
even if it was that the what it did to you, in your spirit, the fact that we're talking about it weeks later, the fact that it's going.
I need to dump it so that it doesn't rest there.
The fact that it raises up things that were 25 years old, that's stuff that white people, we're not dealing with in the same way at all. So that stress that you have, I feel for like a short second, oh, you messed up, I need to correct this for you, or I need to try and smooth this over, I need to try and do that. Yeah, it's like a short split second thing, and I notice it, but I don't feel the impact of it in the same way you would. Sure.
Yeah, it's a very interesting process. There's only a few places where you can talk about it out loud, because it's hard for people to really get it. Like, I was talking with a colleague yesterday after a board meeting, and he's older white gentleman from the Midwest, and told me he's been listening to my show. So I love that I'm continually surprised and impressed by the broad demographics of our podcast listeners. And so he was telling me about some of the episodes he's been listening to. So I talked to him a little bit about this experience that you and I are talking about, and he said, "Well, I would never make that mistake. That's asinine. I would never make that mistake because, as a white male, I dress professionally. I expected to be treated professionally, but I would never make that mistake about you because we're both sitting at a board meeting. We both had shirt and tie and stuff on." I said, "But you did hear me say I was dressed like this when she handed me her keys." Mm-hmm. And so, I wasn't dressed like I had just left the gym. I wasn't dressed like it was Halloween. I wasn't dressed like I was trying to look like, someone who they think is menacing or dangerous. Like, I'm dressed just the way you were. Yeah. But she saw something about me that made me think that I was a valet. Yeah. And so he somehow was sidestepping it by assuming no well-intentioned, educated white person who would hang out in this space would ever mistake you for the valet. Yeah. And I had to remind him, yes, she did. And she didn't catch me in my robe at home and said, "Is your boss home?" Yeah. I was walking into this establishment, and she thought that. So,
and we like to do that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I only know because we as white people who, especially well-intentioned white people who think that we've got to, and I only know because I do it, where you really, that someone else messed up. And so the best option is to scapegoat them and say, "I would never do that."
Right.
That's what said. My heart.
I would never do that.
You know me. Like, of course I wouldn't do that. Like, you can trust me, right? Like, building off this ability to say, "Oh, like, yeah, like there are so many white people in this world who would do that." And instead of saying like, "No, you really could do it." Like, I could still do it. That stuff is still latent, and that stuff's still in the waters. And so we're always working to address that. But like if we, the second I start to think that I'm past capable of perpetuating this stuff is where I start to really become dangerous,
right?
And become that liberal oasis Madison feel that thinks that it's good when it's actually contributing further.
And for me, when that happens, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I didn't expect anyone to kick that lady out of that establishment. And so it's not like I go for the jugular or for blood. But you're right. It kind of kicks into a show we did called Whitesplaining. When white people start trying to explain, "Oh, I would never think that about you." Well, that's because you're sitting next to me at this board meeting. But would you hire me at your organization? Would you let my daughter date your son? Would you want to live next door to me? And not encounter some of the mental calisthenics that you go through as you try to figure out, am I a good one or a bad one? Yeah. So you may not give me your keys, but let's also be open about what you might do, because that's how we move. That's how we move ahead. We're not gonna move ahead by saying you would never do that. You probably do it subconsciously. And my job is not to try to prove people you've got this running in your veins. But my point is, you're not going to make it any less real in my life by telling me you wouldn't do it, because that doesn't make it go away. Yeah. Have you become more astute by listening to my saying it?
Because I mean, like, for me,
what have you learned by this?
One of the things that I know working for you, because I know being your assistant as well as being at Fountain of Life and being an assistant pastor, is that it's not easy work, and there is a sense of needing to be corrected continually.
Sure.
And
because we got to help white people.
Yeah. And so, which is unfortunate, because it feels like it puts another burden on you to like have to take care of all this stuff.
Because y'all want to be perfect, right?
We do. I do. I don't know. Everybody does, but I do. But I think the big thing that I've learned from you, or that you've shown, is that when we have this defensiveness, we it's like when you're willing to admit that you have a heart that has a disease. Mm-hmm. Now for white people, we know that we have a disease of racism that's in the waters, that's going through, and that just by saying we're not racist doesn't really help anything. We know we have to keep rooting it out. And so for me, a lot of the time, I feel like what you have done for me is you've been the one who's saying, "Hey, you need surgery," and then you've actually taken the knife and you've stuck it in the heart.
Is that what it feels like, Tyler?
It feels like it sometimes, because like it really, it's hard to wrestle with the stuff that you don't want to deal with, or to wrestle with the stuff that actually is.
But I didn't pull the plug.
No, not what I'm saying. Yeah, you didn't pull the plug, because you could, and you wouldn't. Honestly, it wouldn't even be the worst thing in the world if you stuck the knife in and like just let it bleed out for a little bit. Just like, I don't know, maybe.
You're having a white man moment right now. Let it out, brother. Let it out.
You don't stick the knife into a heart like that to watch it bleed out. You stick it out. You stick it in there for surgery.
It's a scalpel, not a butcher knife.
Mm-hmm. You're getting there for surgery so that it can be repaired and it can work better and stronger and then that. And so when it comes to those perspectives on racism, you don't stick knives in to watch it bleed out,
because we all lose if that happens.
Mm-hmm. You stick knives into and cause people's hearts to become stronger, to minds become stronger, to create strength for people, especially for people like white allies. And so the natural reaction a lot of times, I think for many of us, is when we hear stuff like that, it's like us pushing it away and just saying, no, I'm actually good. And it's like, but I'm telling you, your heart right now, you got this much longer before,
Right.
So I don't know. That's just like an image that I felt for myself has been.
That's a good image, Tyler. Let me bring two other colleagues in, and these are guys who work in the studio with me to help me continually bring this podcast to the world. And so, Jeremy and Eli, I want to just bring you in. You've been listening to both me and Tyler talk about this. I don't necessarily need a commentary on what we've been saying per se, but how do you think your peers process the retelling of incidents like this? So not necessarily not being in the place where it happened, but people who just might hear a story or read a tweet about, hey, guess what happened? Because I think it's hard for people to believe that something like that could happen to someone. So in your experience, in this community or other places where you've lived, how are you hearing white people respond to the retelling of Black people having these experiences?
I would say there's a few reactions.
Sure.
Sort of what you've been talking about. I think there is one reaction that would sort of defend that there's other things going on in those situations, to try to say, well, they weren't being racist, they misunderstood, all these kind of excuses, which I've heard even from people close to me. When I bring up things like this, they try to, and for some reason, there's just this reaction of trying to say, they acknowledge it, but then say, oh yeah, but this also is true.
Right.
This certainly happens to everybody, all kinds of excuses for racism. And it's sort of hard. I don't know what that reaction is to always defend another point of view. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit on this. It is calling out something in themselves, and they don't want to acknowledge that in themselves, They can see it in other people. I think there is the reaction of saying, this is horrible that these things happen. But they don't allow it to process in their own lives, in their own things. And one thing I was thinking about when you guys were talking about this is another thing we've brought up on the show is white spaces and black spaces. So I think that's a big part of it, is that let's say in this story, I think it was a predominantly white space. And so that is what they're acknowledging. Other people, white people coming into that space who are kind of have control over it. And so they're the people that they're going to identify with and acknowledge. And I think even when the mistake is made known, it's still not so bad because the control is still over the white space. So I don't know that it changes that much, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Like they can feel bad about it, but it's still not going to change in a huge way.
Sure.
And I think that's a big part of it, of why it's allowed to go on so much and we don't really see it very much.
I did white it out pretty well there.
You did white it out.
It was a white out.
Yeah.
White out. Wow. I like that.
Yeah. So I think, and part of what those kind of different reactions of kind of acknowledging it, but, not really letting it take hold personally or trying to excuse it away. I think both of that is a way for people not to really allow it to sink in very much.
Sure.
For white people, I would say.
Definitely. Jeremy, any thoughts?
I jotted down a couple. I mean, for me, there's the big piece that Madison has for a long time said, like, well, we don't do that here. And for me, even,
that being racial acts like that,
whether it's like racial stuff or like larger, urban problems
Sure.
with just like overcrowding or all kinds of stuff. Madison's always been like, well, we don't do that here. Like we're a liberal oasis. Maybe other places do that, but we
Right.
don't. Because it's about like Madison's identity as this liberal city, and it just sort of ignores all the realities of things. And I think it's a growing city that wants to conceive of itself as a small town and doesn't want to like deal with problems or anything that's complicated. It has a vision of itself that it was forged in 1962, and it just wants to keep going with that. We are the liberal bastion. That is an idea which has put politicians in office and made businesses like that concept is $1 billion whatever industry.
But keep in mind, my colleagues are telling me, my black colleagues, that they're having these same kinds of conversations in cities where there's larger concentrations of black folks as well. So I know that this is endemic here, but when we get together, we talk about black folks with white assistants, whether you're in Seattle or Portland or LA, we talk about the perception when we walk in with our staff, and the assumption is the power differential is not what they perceive.
Hey everybody, this is Tyler, the podcast manager at Black Like Me. Just wanted to jump on and share 2 quick things about Black Like Me. Number 1, Patreon. Patreon is an opportunity for you, if you like our show at all, if you enjoy it, if you want us to keep creating this content, to be able to support us financially and to help us do that. If you're as little as $2 a month, you can join our team. We also have some other higher tiers with some more benefits if you join. So please go to patreon.com/blacklikeme to hear more. Number 2 is that if you are interested in having Dr. G speak, if you're interested in him doing some consulting for you, your organization, anything like that, you can go to alexg.com/contact and you can fill out a form to be able to see how you might be able to bring Dr. G to your business or your community. All right, back to the show.
For me, when about the incident you talked about, the way that I think of, one way that I think about it, which is a little bit different, is like if you consider 2 situations, right? So either you, Alex, are Alex or Dr. G, or Tyler is Dr. G. What I think about is if that whatever, and I don't know how conscious this person was of it, but like if they were to make the mistake of saying that you were Dr. Like if the truth was that Tyler was Dr. G and they made the mistake of doing it to you, that they I think could identify and recognize that white person's pain. But when they do it the other way, it's fundamentally disregarding black pain and suffering. Like in some sense, like, and I don't know if this is part of their conscious process or just part of like the way it works, but it's like it seems as though this person and all these other incidents, like, they're okay with the possibility of causing you pain and suffering, much more than they are, or at least slightly more than they are about causing pain and suffering to the white person, which goes just with a history of recognizing that black pain doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, that's why famous gynecologists would practice on black women and not give them anesthesia because black bodies don't really feel pain. And I also want to stress that I wouldn't peg this lady as racist. I mean, because I'm not even trying to call her out at that. I'm just saying it's because I don't know her well enough, but it's an experience that makes you think I can jump through these hoops. I can do what I'm supposed to do in this community.
Yeah.
And if my identity is mistaken here, where else can it be mistaken? Yeah. Where else can people think that I'm menacing when I'm not, or I'm threatening when I'm not, or I'm in a place where I shouldn't be? So it raises that sense of awareness. And so I want to make sure folks who are being engaged in this conversation they don't just think that this is just a whining session. I'm trying to turn this lady out to be this raging racist, but it's a reality that your success as a black person can be belittled or overlooked in a moment, or it can become threatening to those who fear your strength or your capabilities, and so it's very interesting. It can be played up or down. Either you're a threat, or you're not really who you say you are, And white people get to determine that and not black people.
Yeah. I know that's something that, like, that's what caught me about your Justified Anger article, was this experience, you know, like your phrase, I think, was like, you know, everything you'd ever done good in your life didn't matter in this moment.
Right.
When this cop was looking at you in your own parking lot.
Right.
You know, it's like, you know, all the stuff that you could have achieved and worked for and seen, and all the stuff your community has given you, and all the work you'd done in school, and it didn't matter.
Right.
Because some guy gets to say about you,
Sure,
you're suspicious. And so the thing about this incident too, like I always struggle with like trying to find language to how do you describe the situation, right? This
bullshit.
Woman,
That's
well, yeah. What? But but how about this? So we can recognize.
We have to put that big
no,
E
no.
on
It
it.
is.
Did you just leave that in, Jeremy?
Big old E.
Eli.
It is bullshit, no doubt. But we can. So how about this? Like she.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No. We recognize that maybe she isn't the cause of the racism, but she is the source, right? It did happen with her, right? And she may not have consciously made choices about it,
right?
But she if it were someone else, it might not have been there, right? You know, there's one of the things that, you know, I often talk about is, like, you know, in South Africa with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there was a framework and a structure to talk about,
right? Like
this, like, you know, we recognize that as society things were done, right? And it doesn't name individual people, but it talks about a story about the past. And I always feel like there's just this ocean of real human suffering that is the blacks in America that is it's still hanging over everybody.
So how does that inform? An interview can weigh in on this. How does it inform how your white friends respond to? Because I try not to talk about these things until people sort of push me, or I'm just in the wrong mood that day. When they say, I don't get race equity because there aren't problems of racism in Madison. So, because we're talking about this and you get to, like, you're referencing Truth and Reconciliation, like, so for enlightened folks, we know how to categorize it. But again, when these stories are being told in a broader community, does it divide us more? Does it, and again, yeah, for today, I need you to speak for all white people. Does it make white people step back and just say, this is just too sticky, they're too sensitive, I don't want to get into a scenario, if I mix him up with someone, it's an honest mistake. Yeah. I'm not trying to drive this issue home as much as how we think in general, you know, people are responding, like young white males who are feeling like their positions are being threatened in the community. Do you think this is just seen as someone just being overly sensitive, even if I have 3 or 4
I think
experiences with it?
I don't know. I think what's unfortunate is that in a lot of ways, it might be that me being present and then me going and saying, no, I was there too, I saw it happen, unfortunately feels like it validates to more people, because they go, oh wait, so he was there, he actually experienced it, he felt it. We're not just trusting your word. You know what I'm saying?
Right. We need that white validation. No, you're right. No, you're absolutely right.
Because the fact that I have that story to share, and yeah, I don't know, it feels sinister.
Here's something I like for you all to process or respond to. We teach through Justified Anger. We teach a U.S. Black History course, so that people understand how we got to where we are today in terms of racial divide. And what's interesting is people who are somewhat knowledgeable. It's dangerous to have a little bit of knowledge. Well, slavery has existed in every society. True. I mean, I'm a student of history, but I also know that our slavery system in the U.S. was unique because it was race based. And so you could have white men that could rape black women, and the child would be born a slave, not free, because the child would take on the ethnicity of their mother, the status of their mother. All of that is to make rape legal, slavery legal, and to continue to produce and sire future slaves. But what happened was ethnicity or color and skin color and slavery became synonymous, so that even when black people were freed, average white people were able to police black people, prove you're free, show me your papers, and could take you back to your owner or to the constable or whatever the police were called back then. With racial disparities, I'm moving forward a bit. With racial disparities, particularly in a community like Dane County, poverty and the lack of success academically is being connected with ethnicity as well. So that you can be a National Honor Society student like my daughter, but walk into a counselor's office and assume that you're not Big Ten school ready. That's what she was told. I told that story, so I won't retell it again. But so when people are talking about academic disparities, they're thinking, well, it must be kids from Chicago and Milwaukee who can't handle the rigor of Madison School District. We've been saying that since the 70s when I was 10 or 11 years old. They've been blaming our school issues on kids from out of town. But what's happened is, because of the disparity, the assumption now means black means at risk. Ironically, that is true, because my discussions, some of the discussions I'm having are with middle-class black families, or they may not be middle class, but their kids are AP advanced level classes, and their counselors are telling kids in Madison School District with 3.8s and 3.9s to go to a technical college and not go to the University of Wisconsin. That's a reality. People are just thinking, well, we've got to watch out for these kids with a 1.3 who want to go to Wisconsin because they're taking slots away from deserving white kids. We're talking about kids with 3.8s and 3.9s being told. So there's a group of us who are sharing these horror stories that even when we've raised our kids here, because we went to school there, the assumption among many counselors, too many counselors, is that our kids aren't ready for the university. And so I think when we fast forward even more to this incident of just walking in here, or the lady giving me her keys thinking I was the valet, or someone thinking that my assistant Craig was Dr. G, is that we have not associated, America's not associated black skin with success, intelligence. And even when you have it, people want to sort of tug at it to see if it's real. We were up at the Dell speaking at an event a couple of weeks ago, and young adults who were it's AmeriCorps. So these are folks who want to do good work in the community. And a young man walked up and said, "So you're a doctor? What's it in?" Now, I have discussions with people like, "Oh, where's your doctorate from?" Or "What did you study? What your focus was?" But I'm thinking, I'm old enough to be your father. I'm preparing for my talk. I'm here to educate your ignorant ass. And you're going to come here and start asking me questions like I got to prove to you and show you my transcript that I have the right to stand here and talk. I mean, I talk about my background a lot. I typically will have people who are older say those kinds of questions, but I haven't had someone that age. Now, again, I'm not even worried about sounding overly sensitive. I know tones. I work with people for a living. He was kind of quirky anyway, but just the thought that he could just come and just question my credentials is a right, because maybe in his mind, again, that's what was said. So listeners can kind of process how I probably processed it. But my point is, success and achievement in the eyes of many whites are not synonymous with our skin color. So that's why many black people think we need to be the first ones there and the last ones to leave. We've got to be better than just to be average. These things are real because way back to race-based slavery, or that mentality. I'm not even talking about the system of slavery. I'm talking about just the mentality that somehow enslavement or 3/5 of a person is connected to your skin color. We have not lost that. And so folks are still very, very fearful. I was having lunch with someone recently, and they're saying, man, we just got to change the culture here in Madison. And like these guys, like with their boxers showing, holding their crotches. That's a gang sign. I said, that's not a gang sign. It might be off-putting. It might be inappropriate, but it's not a gang sign. Here's how I know, because people in every gang is doing it. Typically, gang signs distinguish you. You got people doing it in gangs, not in gangs, who might be in this gang, that gang. They're all doing it. That's how you know it's not a gang sign. But you're assuming that because black guys are doing it, they're in gangs. Now, I don't want to see people's drawers walking down the street either, but I'm not just assuming. Like, why would you assume that posturing means that they are in a gang? You could think they don't have good home training, they need a belt, etc. But why do you associate that with gangs? Because if white guys do it and white guys do it, are they in a gang? Eminem does it. Is he in a gang? But if a black person does it, so anyway, you can tell I'm just kind of processing these things. But again, I think what we haven't dissected, I think, Jeremy, this is back to your point, what we haven't wrestled with, when there was a framework like in South Africa, what we haven't wrestled with is we haven't lost that residual effect that, okay, so this person at the front desk is not a teacher, But what if she's a teacher? What if she's a lawyer? What if she's a doctor? I've talked to enough black men who've told me my white attorney told me to plead out when I didn't do it. Now, I did stuff. That's why I'm in the system. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But they told me that's a white judge, that's a white jury, that's a white person. They probably play golf together. Go in there, plead it out, just make a plea, get it off your record, and then end up going to jail. Then they experience recidivism. I'm talking to too many people who are working with too many whites in key places, whether it's teachers, administrators, social workers, who are making this assumption between worth, value, abilities, and skin color, and we're not post-racial yet.
Well, and I didn't mean to be too abstract with the truth and reconciliation thing. I just mean like the point of it was like there's a story. There's at least a story. Because
I got you.
And this story that you talk about, like gangs coming up from Chicago and Detroit, like they've been talking about this since I lived here. I mean, like, and I've lived here a lot less time than you have, but there's always the story: guns coming up from Chicago, people coming in from Detroit, coming down from Minneapolis. It's always like we're fine here.
That's code. Chicago's code for black people.
Yeah. I guess the thing that is surprising to me is oftentimes I'll be talking to someone, and it's someone that I really respect, and they'll be like, yeah, well, all that crime's coming, guns coming in from Chicago. And I'm like, like 5 seconds ago, we were on the same page. Now you're just like, this is nonsense. Right, the people do come in from other cities. Do we have any evidence at all that is the sole cause of all these problems? No. Right, but that's a story that like gets told a whole lot, and it's told in this tone of voice, like everyone knows it's true. Like, well, we got all the crime coming in.
Like we have all this crime coming in.
What do you
I asked a guy this week. I said, "So, you're afraid of a black guy holding his crotch, but not a white guy in a trench coat? Because if your hand is on your testicles, it ain't on a trigger. Why are we afraid of white men walking into schools and theaters and shopping malls and places of worship, blowing it the hell up? So y'all are scared of Chicago because of what Chicago is doing, but." When's the last time you've seen Chicago do a mass murder? People in here do a mass murder. So why aren't you afraid of white men who fit this kind of profile? We went into this whole mental health thing. Well, with mental health issues, you got to. But people are traumatized by poverty and abuse and all those other things. They can't be traumatized. So post traumatic stress is just a syndrome that's reserved for white kids in the suburbs who've experienced divorce, but it's not a product of systemic racism and poverty, and how we become so afraid of one image, but you're so disconnected from a real phenomenon that's happening in this country that is I don't know, so threatening.
I think it's that disconnect that really is a big part of it. Like the reality is there's not much interaction with the reality of these situations between white people and black people. And I don't know all the answers for that. I think some of it is what Justified Anger is addressing, which is the systems, and what you talk about having black people set the table more, be at the table to be able to talk about these things in those roles. Because, going back to when we talked to Rob Lee about his ancestors, he did make the point that Robert E. Lee maybe morally, personally thought that slavery was wrong, but basically threw up his hands and said, this is the system, though. Like, we can't change that. It's institutionalized. It's not going to change with the people in power. And I think that people may not say that these days, but that's what they actually feel and think inside. And the reality is, for white people, they don't have to deal with those things, so they're not going to want to change them. It's not having an impact in their lives. And I think that's what it takes for people to do something about it.
Sure. And I actually feel that this is part of the reason why occasionally I have you three men in the studio so we can have these honest discussions, because many times we get the greatest feedback, because I think that there are white listeners who want to understand these issues and they don't necessarily have the relationships where they can really talk honestly, because a lot of this grows out of things that we have offside the mic. We'll process something and I'll say, hey, Eli, hit the switch. Let's talk about this. Or we'll talk about it, in another setting. I may have this conversation with Jeremy or Tyler. And so we want people to understand that the way you can't just wish it away, but you do have to build relationships and learn. And so you reference our work with Justified Anger. For people who are not from this area, If you just go to mobilizemadison.com, that's just an easier way to do it. I don't have to spell it out for you. If you just go to mobilizemadison.com, you can really look at the work of Justified Anger. You can also go to alexg.com because there's a media button that will show just some responses in the news, local news or in print, of ways in which my team and I have responded to some of the racial realities here in this community. So if you're just trying to figure out what we're doing in our community and how we're trying to build conversations like this through real relationship, not just isolated discussions. I don't go this deeply with folks who I don't have a rapport with because it's too much. It's like opening up a wound and then you got to walk to the next thing. So you've got to I've got to share things with people who I think may not understand everything, may not even agree with everything, but they have to believe that I believe what I'm saying, that, they have to believe that if that experience triggered other things, that it probably needs to be watched or listened to. So I want people to take a look at that again through alexg.com or mobilizemadison.com. Take a look at what we're doing. Get on our mailing list. Find out why we're angry, but the extensive, detailed work we're doing in bridging the gap between well-intentioned would-be white allies. Not that they would be white because they are, but would-be allies, and the African Americans who we're working with to build capacity and to just strengthen their leadership skills, is so that we begin to work together on agendas that are set by the Black community to really resolve many of these issues. That's how I think we're going to turn things around in communities like Madison. That's the work that we're doing to reduce the microaggressions in this community. There've got to be more examples of where Black people can say what they said and don't really feel shut down. I was leading diversity workshop. This is why I don't do diversity workshops anymore. I was leading a diversity workshop, and I talked about the first time I was pulled over by the police. The incident that Jeremy referenced happened just a few years ago, but this one happened probably a couple of decades ago. I was dressed in a black suit. I was going to take photos for our church brochure. That's before websites. And so I was going to take headshots. Police pulled me over, said I fit the profile of a drug dealer. I was like in my 20s, pulled me over in broad daylight, at a bank where I used to work 2 blocks from my church. It was really, really embarrassing. When I told some of my friends about it, one of my friends said, "Well, you do drive a nice car. What do you expect?" That was my friend's, and he was completely serious. He wasn't trying to be harsh. He was just saying, I said, I don't know. Maybe they should think that maybe this is before grad school, then maybe they should think I'm a Black man that has a double major from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. I've created my own nonprofit. I'm a pastor of a church. Like, I don't know. Ignorant me thinking that I shouldn't be mistaken for a drug dealer. And nothing was wrong. I got no warning because nothing was wrong. They just ran my place. My lights weren't out or anything like that. But fitting the profile of a drug dealer, I mean, like being told that was something that was just so crazy. So I was telling this story once to a group of white folks who were in a diversity training that I was leading. And she raised her hand and she said, "My husband got mistaken for a drug dealer too. He had this 57, whatever. And they pulled him over and they thought he was a drug dealer too." I said, "But when your husband got out of the car, did they still think he was a drug dealer?" And she said, "No." So afterwards, I wasn't as bold. I would have done this differently now. I pulled her to the side and I said, "Why did you feel the need to negate my story?" And she said, "Because I felt too embarrassed. It was too painful to think that that's your reality." I said, "But so to comfort your heart, you shut down my story? How does that help the group? How does that help you? And how does that help me?" She's like, you're right. I just couldn't keep silent because what I need her to do is to take that energy and go to PTO, old me, whatever they're called, PTO, my daughter's grown, I don't know what they're called now, but the Parent Teacher Organization Association meetings, go to city council meetings, challenge profiling, do something with it. But don't shut me down in a meeting where I've got the mic and I'm the leader to try to make it seem that what I experience is experienced by white people all the time because they thought your husband's car was a drug dealer's car. They did not think your husband was a drug dealer. They saw me, my black ass, and my black suit and still thought. You know what I started doing? This is before the cell phone days, before smartphones. I had a pager. Lordy. So while they're doing this, I'm trying to look like I'm not bending over because as a black man, 10 and 2, I remember sitting in my car hiding my pager because I felt that would have just validated what they or who they thought of. I've always liked technology. That was before SkyTel. And so, you hit me up on a page, I call you back. But I'm being pulled over by broad day, in the broad daylight, and I'm thinking about how not to incriminate myself. If you fast forward, I'm just thinking how this could play out today. You're moving in your seat. You're leaning over. You've got a pager in your hand. I'm just thinking, this is how stuff goes down. And she just shouldn't have given that example. Hey guys, any closing remarks? I'm getting tired of talking about all of this.
I was just gonna say I think that's the lesson that I've been learning recently and it's as simple as like with my kids.
Sure.
I call them on something they're doing wrong, and their inclination is to give me 5 minutes of excuses, and we just had to say like, no, I just want you to listen and absorb this.
Sure.
So that you don't do it again. I don't want all the like explanations. And so I think that's what I've been trying to do too. And of course we want conversations because that's what we're having, and we want people to speak out in their spheres. But I think there's also a time just to say, I'm going to listen and take this in so that I can learn instead of jump on this impulse to try to like identify or make excuses and things like that. People do. No, it can be as simple as that, I think, can go a long way.
And, and the best cross-cultural friendships that I've had have not just been with yes men and yes women, yes people who just say, that's true, Rev, yes, amen, go get them, those darn white people. But it's people who even listen, because there are days I know I'm ranting. There are days I'll say things and people say, now come on, do you feel that way about all white people? Okay. I just feel that way today. So no, I don't feel that way all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't mind being corrected when I'm just going off, because someday it just bees that way sometimes. Mm-hmm. But for the friends who just listened, and this is a strong pastoral skill. Like, don't try to counsel people out of their feelings or their grief. Just listen. I think that's what makes a person a good friend. And I think an ally and a friend can be synonymous. So I think just that ability to really listen is really important. But if that woman felt that in that 90-minute discussion and in that 3-minute example, that it was too painful to hear my reality for 3 minutes, imagine what it's like to live in this black skin, this black reality. Imagine what that's like. Like, you want to just shift and go to the next thing. Like, is it lunchtime yet? Mm-hmm. And I'm still not sure that she heard what I'm saying. So I want to just give a challenge out here to our white listeners. I want you to help us to expand the Black Like Me family. So I want you to share this episode. I want you to tweet it. I want you to post it on Facebook. I want you to really help us push it, because there aren't a whole lot of places where would-be white allies can go to hear true black speak, black consciousness, and process it with trusted white friends. And trusted doesn't mean that we're always on the same page. Tyler already said I put a knife in his heart. It's
true.
But white people, black people work to not put it in your back. So we want to put it in your heart, so at least you see me coming. You know what I'm doing.
And it's surgery.
And it's surgery. Out. Exactly. So I just want to challenge folks. Don't just keep this goodness to yourself, because you know people who are trying to wrestle with things. You know white people who have adopted black children. You know white people who have married black people. You know white people who feel a call to go to a black church, a black organization, to live in a black neighborhood. You know folks who need to be enlightened. Stop patting white people on the back because they can be warehoused with black people, but not really know them, not really value them, not really listen to them. And so you want to be part of the solution? You want to do something that's ally worthy? Help us spread this message, this podcast, because you know someone, lawyers, social workers, judges, doctors, teachers, pastors, people who are living in communities where their client base is becoming increasingly more diverse. That's code for increasingly more black. So turn them on to this. It's not just enough for you just to listen and hoard this up. White people, I need you to share and take this message and did I say that okay? Did I do that well? Do I need to say anything else, Tyler?
You need my validation.
Okay, I got you. And subscribe. Don't just listen. Assistant. Yeah, don't cherry pick, brother. Don't cherry pick. Because believe it or not, I can see you through the podcast. So I know who you all are. And so don't just come. Now? Don't just, I can see.
What are they doing in the car right now?
I see Sally and I see Melissa.
What's Melissa doing?
She's drinking a pumpkin spice latte.
What about Ronnie?
Oh my gosh. And she's listening to gangster rap.
Skip.
And Skip is taking his boat off the lake because it's getting. Let me stop. You're trying to get me in trouble, my good white listeners. And so listen, white people. You know, I love you. But I'm very serious. I'm as serious as a black heart attack. Take this word out. Share it with your friends. Do this great big push. And when you do, let me know you've done it. Let me know. Say, hey, Dr. G, we heard you. So tweet out at me at Alex G Jr. on Twitter. That same handle on Instagram. Find Reverend Dr. Alex G on Facebook. If you're listening and you're doing that, let me know. And if there are other subjects that you want me to process with my white crew, tweet questions out at me. Because what I found out just recently is that the show actually raises more questions than it offers answers. That means we're doing our job, because I'm not trying to answer everything for white people, because then you'll turn me off and then you'll go become the cross-cultural expert. No. We're not going to let you get off that easily. And so tweet out the hard questions that you have, but you know someone who needs this, because we're more divided than we have ever been in this country. And I want to offer some hope and some help. And I think if you listen, we can help you, and you'll have a greater degree of sensitivity and openness when you become fortunate enough to be in a setting where you can begin building some very meaningful cross-cultural experience. A black like me, my black heart feels really good. I feel like I've laid my burden down. So I want to thank Tyler and Jeremy and Eli for being here. Eli, you're always on the board, but it's always great when you can chime in. And Jeremy, you helped me to think through, with the team, just how do we reach more folks and how do we make our message relevant. So it's great bringing you guys in to hear your voices.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
As well. Yes. Yeah. So, hey, I just want to make a deal with you. Every time crazy white shit like this happens, like someone thinks my assistant's me, y'all got to buy me a drink.
All right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah?
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Collectively.
What kind of drink?
You will get a drink.
I need
a hard drink after that. So
Yeah.
I'm just putting y'all on the spot. So
Not a coffee,
because I want there to be some group culpability. I want y'all to come get y'all white people. So every time something like this happens, one of y'all got to take me out for a drink.
Sounds good. You keep a list. And we'll,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
How many drinks is that a day?
Oh my goodness. We'll cap it at 3.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I want to thank Corey Seffel for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nylen, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Ooh, black like me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.
Ooh.